retired from JP Morgan after 31 years in 1998. Basically moved up here on a permanent basis after that, becoming a full-time resident in 2004. In 2005, a bunch of my neighbors came to me because of my financial background and asked if I would be interested in running for the school board. In the interim, my son had moved on. In the interim, my son had moved on to the property, and I had four grandchildren living basically 100 yards away, and they felt that combining the financial background with the grandchildren issue, I would be electable. Well, I was, and that began an odyssey, which initially I called or characterized as a preoccupation. Some would call it an obsession in trying to understand better an incredibly complex spending and tax system. Fortunately, at the same time, there's Hubie, who at that time was our representative, introduced me to Jeff Norman, and so the Vermont Tiger has become a major outlet, if you will, of my ranting to the page. Does that do the bio? Okay. As far as advice to a candidate for governor and what to do, mine is very simple. I've been arguing this for 4 years when I got the numbers under control, and that is, it wasn't as apparent at the time, but it clearly is now. We've been overspending out of the general fund, and we have a structural deficit. Arthur Wolf mentioned that we have $100 million deficits for as far as the eyes can see. And that's an issue. We have an issue there of either raising taxes or cutting spending or both. Lo and behold, over here, the largest consumer of our revenues that we generate in the state, education, K through 12, about 56 cents out of every dollar generated by taxes and other sources internally for eliminating federal funds, is consumed by K through 12. And if you read Art's work, extrapolating that into the future, that 56 cents is going to become much, much larger once we do something about it. The structural deficit over here in the general fund is almost, give or take a little bit, dollar for dollar what you can save on the education side. In fact, the education side, in my judgment, at a minimum, without in any way reducing resources that are inconsistent with providing a quality education for our kids, at a minimum can generate between 100 and, in my estimate, as much as $200 million of permanent structural savings. Now, what you have there on the flip side, or two sides of that handout, is an illustration of that. This was a teeter-totter that Tom Pelham put together about, who's one of the governor's administrative staff, showing how out of whack things are in terms of property taxes, and what could be saved by simply one structural change, and that would be increasing our teacher-to-student ratio to 13:1. That's a $96 million annual savings. And that's a very conservative number, because we're only using average salaries. If we were to have, if the legislature had adopted and implemented the what the administration called the retirement check valve, which would have involved replacing 2 retiring teachers with only 1 over the next 4 years, which would have increased our current ratio, which is about 10.4 to 1 to 11.5, 11.6 to 1. The savings would have been much larger than $96 million. So, advice to a candidate for governor: if you want to help solve the problem, the structural deficit on the general fund can be largely, not immediately at day one, but over a 2 to 3 year implementation period, could be largely resolved in its entirety by legitimate warranted cuts on the education side that, given declining enrollment and given our incredible overstaffing, are fully warranted without compromising the capacity